Hey everyone, before we get to today's episode, I wanted to share what I think is a pretty exciting announcement. We are opening up our Rival AMP community. So some of you listening have been part of AMP from the beginning of the company. It has been our small, very small friends and family community around Rival where we post updates, ask for feedback, kind of share what's going on in the business. But actually, we think there's a lot more potential as we've grown, as our community has grown, as we've met more of you, to actually build and scale a proper community within Rival AMP. So what Rival AMP is going to be is it's going to be a community for challenger marketers on WhatsApp. We're going to share ideas and observations from the challenger marketing world that we see and ask everyone to contribute to that, share about challenger brands, marketing news, industry events, job opportunities, ask for feedback and input, use each other as a sounding board. We think it's going to be really great. So if you are interested in joining and are not already a member, please either reach out to me if you know me or go on over to our website, wearerival.com, and you can apply from there. This is free, but we do want to make sure that we're adding people that are really interested and can really add value. That's it. On to the episode.
They were almost a constant and always on promise and of deals, promotions. Everything was 20, 30, 40, 50% at some point, which I think just creates a culture of addicts. It's people become addicted to deals, and this is what they come to expect, which is the worst thing that you can do, because now that we have this market correction and everybody's talking about profitability, well, you need to improve your margins, be it contribution margins per store, per basket, be it, making sure that you can't necessarily offer free delivery all the time because you have to cover the cost of your logistical arm of the company. So all of these different things, right, we don't do. We have one obsession. It's not speed. We know that speed is important, but our obsession is quality.
I'm Eric Fulweiler, and this is Scratch, bringing you marketing lessons from the leading brands and brains, rewriting the rulebook from scratch for the world of today. Hey everyone, my guest today is Diego Tarek De Aristegui. I apologize, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but fascinating conversation. Nonetheless, Diego is the CMO of Mano, which is one of the fastest growing quick commerce players in Africa right now. So it's a category, and I mentioned this, that I've been personally fascinated by here in the UK, where you've got so many brands, so much money being spent in the space. So it's really interesting to hear Diego's perspective being the CMO of one of these businesses, and also how they're approaching growth and doing things very differently. I love just kind of hearing about what it's like to be the CMO of a business like that, and how much change and growth and energy there is in the industry right now. I really liked how he talked about this kind of career-defining moment for him. He called it life-changing, actually, after spending some time in the agency world and with big brands, going back and getting an MBA, and why he thinks that type of commercial, fundamental business experience and understanding is so important for marketers. And then the main focus of the conversation is how Mano is approaching growth, and it's all about sustainable growth. So it's very different from how a lot of the other brands and businesses in this category are approaching things. I think it's very refreshing, and also gives them a very sharp point of difference in a very crowded industry. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Diego Tarek, CMO of Mano. Hey, Diego, thanks so much for joining me. How are things down in Madrid?
Thank you, Eric. I'm very, very happy to be here. Well, Madrid, as you can see, a bit warmer than perhaps at your end, but a bit cold. I think just the house is pretty warmed up. Very happy to be. Madrid, can't complain.
I love it down there. I've got my mid-January in London set up here with my scarf and my hot tea for those that are only listening and not watching. All right, Diego, I'm really excited about this conversation. I think what you're doing with Mano, one, we haven't had too many guests who are building businesses and brands in Africa on the show yet. We did have Masala Phillips, who's the CMO of Old Mutual, on recently, which was interesting. We've done some work with them actually down in South Africa, but really curious just to hear more about what's going on in your category on the African continent. And then also I love, in our prep call, which was a couple months ago now, but I was fascinated just by kind of the very challenger approach. Obviously, it's a challenger business in the category of quick commerce, but also the approach that it seems you and the leadership team are taking to building Mano seems challenger even within the challenger category. So I'm excited to get into it. So could you maybe just give, I would have given a brief introduction about you on in the pre-recorded intro, but maybe just talk a little bit about, the 1 to 2 minute elevator pitch of Mano and where you all are at in the journey of building this business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, I mean, the best term that can define Mano is quick commerce, right? So today we are a company that owns the entire value chain of what we do. So we, source our products, we hold them in our dark stores, we even import products that are not necessarily available within the markets that we have. And from the pickers, the store operators, the riders, all of that crew are actually Mano employees. And I think this is quintessential to our recipe for success, because this is, we really want to control the quality end to end. And basically what we do is that anything that can actually fit within a backpack or a box that can fit on the back of a motorcycle will be delivered to a customer's home in under 30 minutes. That's pretty much what Mano is today. We started off our first operation in Angola. Reason being because the CEO actually lived there for 10 years, and the family business of the CEOs is a massive distributor of and manufacturer of FMCG products, headquartered in Switzerland. They have a very intimate understanding of the market. They have a very good contact of networks around the place. So it was intuitive and natural and very logical to start off there, right, in a sense, but perhaps not the most logical place to start a business or a startup in Africa. People don't think about Angola as your first choice. And then in the second year of operation, which was 2022, we've opened Nigeria, which is obviously a key market, a strategic market in Africa, population size, digital readiness, the number of youth under the age of 30, right? 70% of the total population, which is crazy. And here we've been seeing really amazing growth in the two countries. We've grown triple digits from 2021, 2022 in the two markets. So that's a very good sign. And today we're at a stage where we're really pondering the big questions, right? And I think it's going to be the theme of our conversation, how to grow sustainably. What do we do next? How do we consolidate where we are, but also what do we do where we look at for expansion? Because we have a big plan of actually, being in Africa, Pan-African focused company where we're established in different markets where we think that our offering is needed.
And to the extent that you can share, what's the scale of the business right now? Obviously, sounds like it's growing very quickly from the base of where it started. And how does Mano fit into the category of quick commerce within Africa overall? Who are the competitors? Who's the market leader? I got a sense of kind of how you all are doing things differently, but where do you fit into the overall puzzle right now?
Today I think that we are definitely no longer a startup. We're a scale-up. And I think that we're at a point in time in the company where we're trying to change the mindset that we're in a sense. I think that at the beginning, everybody was wearing every possible hat in the company, and today we're trying to get into a certain structure where we actually have pretty defined verticals, and we have leaders for every vertical that come with a certain background, a certain experience, and can add a certain added value, right? But we want to retain. We know that we're not yet this. We need to remain very much a group of people that can wear different hats, that can come and contribute to different solutions. And I think this is one thing that is part of our, key ingredient for, whatever success, whatever growth we've actually experimented recently. So, and in terms of size of a company, we're definitely today, resources-wise, kind of really an SME, right? Small and medium-sized company. But the way we're in the narrative of quick commerce in Africa, we're definitely one of the first players to come in with this business model. So we have, and we're not the first one, but we still have that first mover advantage, because it's a state, Nigeria, Angola, Ivory Coast, even South Africa, which are countries in North Africa, which are contributing. You're starting to see players coming in with Talabat. Glovo is a big company based out of Barcelona, but expanding in Africa. I think we're very much at an infancy stage when it comes to the actual segment. So we're developing the market in a sense. We're kind of like educating our customers on the benefits of quick commerce, and really there's a very, I would say, effortful but also a bit costly process of educating customers and making them understand that you can change your behavior from going to a brick and mortar and retail and a physical retail space and actually start using this. And I think the biggest barrier is a trust barrier, right? I think not only from do people feel at ease paying online, but also I think there's been for a very long time just a relationship of companies over-promising and under-delivering and really like conning people. I think that the biggest conversation that we're seeing in Africa is, another player that's coming and saying that, we're going to offer you a delivery service in under 30 minutes, and we're going to actually deliver food or groceries in pristine condition, or actually hot and not cold, or, like somebody else orders a piece of a product and actually gets something totally different, which is, I think there's nightmarish horror stories that people are sharing online, and it's becoming a very trendy conversation. So we are at a point in time where we're trying to define the codes of what quick commerce and what this industry can actually, offer to people. And also not only from a customer point of view, but how a business should behave, right? How we should behave as a business, not only what's our relationship with our customers. That's kind of like, so I think you mentioned the competitors today. You have a couple of regional players that have done interesting things. We have Jumia, I can mention, which is one of the biggest, and very recently decided to refocus on different things. But we're amongst, from our direct competitors, we're amongst the only ones that are solely focusing on quick commerce and deciding to really like invest 100% of our time and effort and resources in this vertical for the time being.
It's a category I've been, I guess, professionally fascinated by. Ironically, as a consumer, I have yet to use a quick commerce service here in London. I don't really know why that is. I actually just want to do it out of curiosity at this point to see what the experience is like. But just the explosive growth, and also, and I know we're going to get into this in a little bit, talking about how you all are different, but my perceived kind of lack of differentiation. It seems like there's so many, there's so much, particularly above the line advertising from these businesses, so much about couponing and discount to try to get people on board. But I know plenty of people, one of our co-founders may or may not be included in this, who just kind of like goes between the different solutions of GetAir and Gorillas and, all the other ones that exist here in London, because they're all doing different promotions at a different time. And so we're going to get to that. But the question I want to ask, and I don't know if this is a fair way to ask it because it's so broad, but in a category that like this, that is so new, that's growing so quickly, there's so many players, there's so much that must be changing. And then in the African continent and these markets where it's growing so quickly, there's so much changing. I guess, what's it like to be the CMO of a business like this? And I know, you spent some time in the agency world. You were at Diageo for a while. So I don't know if it's fair to say that this is kind of the first of these types of gigs for you, but I'd just be curious to hear a little bit about what it's like at a high level. And maybe I'd also be curious to talk about like what a day in the life or a day in the week looks like for the CMO of a business like this.
No, absolutely. So, I think you're totally right. And it is, this gig is by far the most different and the most alternative that I've actually had the chance and pleasure, to embark on. So I've been, for the better part of my life, part of like massive organizations. So PwC, that's kind of already like almost, the size of a country in terms of workforce. Then you had Leo Burnett, part of the Publicis Group, another, big nation. And then you have Diageo, which is also a big machine where, a lot of, one can learn fantastic things, but I don't think that they particularly prepare you for the roller coaster ride that is, joining not only a startup or a scale up, but a startup or a scale up of a totally new industry that is still trying to define itself, right? And so that kind of like, I remember very well when I got, I was headhunted by the head of people and culture there, and I had a conversation with the CEO, which, we clicked directly because we share a lot of different passions. I remember saying, okay, wow, that's kind of like, great opportunity, but the level of risk is massive, and I was just, I think it was almost a year ago when I decided to join. I had signed a contract with them, and suddenly you see these headlines by the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, predicting the end of quick commerce as a business model, right? And you had comments on LinkedIn, on VC forums saying the shittiest business model that has ever been created. And I'm like, shit, what did I just do, right? I'm just joining something that seems to be, a sinking ship, but it's not, And I was seduced by the fact that the strategy of why Africa, we can perhaps discuss it a bit later, but just to remain on the topic here, is that the story, like the why we're doing this in Africa makes total sense. So I think that, being in a fast growing, category, which has been defined by like incredible stories like gorillas that managed to raise, and I think it became $1 billion company, one of the fastest companies to reach a unicorn status. The kind of the reality check that I've had to live with just after joining was that it is today a segment because of the pandemic, what happened during the pandemic and the growth rate that we'd seen, but with 2022 unfolding the way it did, right, and the massive market corrections that we've seen, all tech companies, but specifically on quick commerce, I think that we just had like, me as a CMO, the first thing that I had to do, right, is to understand, all right, an industry obsessed by speed, right, where everything was about, under 10 minutes, which meant how do you, what types of investments, what are types of, costs, how you ramp up cost was, dictated by this obsession with speed, the fact of, being one of the hottest investment opportunities at a certain point in time, where people manage to, raise hundreds of millions of dollars in such a short period of time. All of that was was just a consequence of having, I would say, premature mindset, or thinking about things in a premature way, right? Just thinking that whatever happened during the pandemic was actually this new normal, where actually what we're seeing is that we need to go back to life pre-COVID with some behavioral changes and some corrections in that sense. So I think that the biggest thing that I had to do joining a company like this is trying to have the right mindset, right? And try to sober up. So what I try to do is like, okay, sober up from this obsession with speed, which I think is the wrong obsession, right? It doesn't really matter that much at the end of the day to the customer. And I kind of have the right mindset and try to define not only the marketing strategy, right, and what we need to do, but try to define the culture in the company through a different lens. And that was, I think, one of the biggest challenges as well. So the second thing is that, we are at a point in time where we're trying to fight the perception, right? And it's exhilarating because I think that's what challenger brands do, right? They either challenge what incumbents are doing. They are challenging a questionable behavior, right? Or questionable codes, or even they're challenging perceptions. So I think that one of the things that excites me the most, and, my day is basically really involves two different things, right? Like running the business, helping to run the business, making sure that whatever we need to do and really using logical, critical thinking to take the right decisions and trying to reach those goals in a sustainable way that we need to reach, right? But the second thing is, okay, how do we try to really change that perception and that narrative outside of just what we do, right? So how do we really create an entire different narrative for the entire category? Because we know, right, if people see the entire category differently, it's going to benefit us, right? And we want to champion that objective, that mission.
So I want to dig into that sustainable growth, what that means, how you're doing it. But you mentioned a couple things. I just want to come back. You mentioned thinking about and trying to have an impact on culture, and also you mentioned running the business as part of what you're excited about in this role and what you do. And you know, you don't hear that from every CMO. And it sounds like that's more of a priority for you. And I'd just be curious kind of what that looks like, if that was something that you were looking for in a CMO role, or has kind of developed just based on the nature of Mano and how the executive team is structured. But if you were, I don't know if it's like a formal remit or just what you're passionate about, it sounds like you've got a bit of a focus on the internal culture and actually, you know, maybe not broader business operations, but how you're thinking about building the business overall, not just within marketing and bringing the product to market. So what does that look like?
I mean, yeah, I think it's well, there's two things, right? I think there's the reality of the business today, right? I think that so the more each person, let's say, the more the leadership or even each person at the company has the ability to understand the machine as a whole, right? The stronger we're going to be. So I think that's true for any business. I think that, and especially it's a necessity for companies that are still, building themselves, right? Like perhaps startup scale-ups, whatever you want to call them. So we don't have the luxury to have, only specialists. We don't have the luxury to come and say, yeah, we're going to have just somebody that only understands finance, or somebody that only understands marketing, but has absolutely no clue about, business fundamental, has no business acumen, doesn't understand commercial operations, doesn't understand any of these different things. So I think that this is something that and they say, right, at the end of the day, people invest as much in the team that's, working at a startup or a scale up as the actual business model, the product that you're offering, and if not more. So that's something that I've learned. I did an MBA here in Madrid not too long ago. And one of the reasons I did the MBA, and this is more my personal, I wouldn't call it passion, but I decided to do an MBA because I remember being at a disadvantage in some conversations in the past, right? When I was at the agency world, I learned things from, types of people that were just amazing, right? Like I had really great mentors overall. But we felt, and that kind of like an overall problem of the industry, of the advertising industry, is that they seem to be at a disadvantage today when it comes to consultants that have a better understanding of how a business runs, a business models, and it can add more value. And now they're getting into the creative realm, so they're buying off. I mean, think that Accenture, or if I'm not mistaken, Accenture bought Droga 5. And then David Droga decided that the best marriage would be with a big consultancy firm, not necessarily with an advertising or media company, or holding group. So, and I remember being in front of clients, right? And I think you discussed it with Aaron North. I just watched your podcast, which I found amazing. Is that this idea of like feeling a bit powerless because you're recommending something, but you're kind of constrained to only the communication part of it, right? Even not perhaps the marketing part of it per se. And then you have, somebody else making a decision. So I hated that, not being, perhaps it's me being a control freak, but I hated not being able to take decisions and bring to life things that but I also felt that I was at a disadvantage from, understanding or adding value to a C-suite or to decision makers. And this is why I decided to do an MBA, which was a life-changing experience. And any marketeer that can go into broadening their skill set, either through an MBA or, going into data science, things that are not necessarily natural, to the world of marketing, or traditional to the world of marketing, I highly recommend it, because I think it makes the entire difference.
I totally agree. And I think it differentiates you as a candidate, but also allows you to approach the role of the CMO or whatever marketing role you're looking for, and take it to be so much broader than just advertising or communications, and actually do the role that I think marketing fundamentally should do, which is basically how do you connect the value of your product to the needs of the market, as broad as that. And part of that is brand, part of that is comms, part of that is marketing, but it's so much more. And actually, I see that a lot. I think the MBA route is interesting and certainly one way to do it. Also, a lot of the people that we've interviewed, you see a lot of them come up through like the big marketing-led CPG organizations like the Unilevers and the P&Gs, which are basically like an MBA through how they do things, although a lot of those people go to MBAs as well. But, they're running P&Ls. They have holistic responsibilities as brand managers, part of which is marketing. And that's something I've really enjoyed about how my career has evolved, coming up in advertising agencies, because I always felt that I liked advertising, but what I loved was figuring out how to build and grow a business. And advertising was a way to do that. So when I, with Vayner, first had a GM role, and then my last company where I was chief marketing and commercial officer, and now obviously here as CEO of Rival, that's the stuff that I get really passionate about. So I think that's such a good, particularly for, well, I guess really at any stage, but certainly if you're thinking about kind of the next phases of your career, I think getting that experience one way or the other is such a good shout. So coming back to the main topic, sustainable growth. So let's start with, how do you think about, either define or just kind of your perspective on sustainable growth, and what does that mean for Mano and how you all are thinking about building the business and brand?
Yeah, I think, I think it's important to, I think that sustainable growth is always relative, right? So there's never like an absolute a formula or you should be doing this and not that. I think that really it's about where you are, what stage the company is at, where you are as a company, the resources that you have at hand, the type of people that you have at hand, and even very importantly, the state of the market, the environment, right, that you're operating in. And we are operating in a very complex, difficult environment, much more tight than it was before, specifically when it comes to, access to funding, etc. So it kind of forces us to look at, there are decisions that are imposed on us, and then there are decisions that we make, that we take. So I think that today, to go back to, one of the codes that other players have been building when money was aplenty, was that everything was subsidized. You see what I mean? Like, I think that there was a growth strategy that was clearly unsustainable, right? This kind of like promising, if you couldn't hit 10 minutes or under, that would mean failure for some businesses. So that meant you had to open an very high number of dark stores in strategic locations in urban environments that were simply not, cost effective. It's just rent was, unsustainable. The number of staff that you had to actually employ was unsustainable for the actual demand that was happening, or the stage of the, the life cycle of that segment or that industry at the time. So I think that that's something that when we look at growth, right, we have a very clear principle. Like, we need to make sure that we break even and become profitable somewhere, then we decide to move on, right? Because we never want to leave an operation behind and, at risk or exposed to, not being able to reach what we call autonomy, from necessarily having to inject some capital. So if we decide, for example, to expand too fast, that means that our resources become, more scarce, and we can't necessarily attend to a problem somewhere where we know we've been there for a year and a half or 2 years. We have loyal customers, we have a reputation to preserve, we have a lot of things to take care of. The second thing is, I think that unfortunately, the codes that players have been establishing in the market today was beyond the fact that speed is the most important benefit, is the fact that they were almost a constant and always on promise and of deals, promotions. Everything was 20, 30, 40, 50% at some point, which I think just creates a culture of addicts. Like, it's people become addicted to deals, and this is what they come to expect, which is the worst thing that you can do, because now that we have this market correction and everybody's talking about profitability, well, you need to improve your margins, be it contribution margins per store, per basket, be it, making sure that you can't necessarily offer free delivery all the time because you have to cover the cost of your logistical arm of the company. So all of these different things, right, we don't do. We have one obsession. It's not speed. We know that speed is important, but our obsession is quality. And the fact that our customer deserve a good customer experience, and they have to be satisfied throughout time, right? So that's kind of like what directs our efforts. And if that means, all right, we need to do less deals because we need to kind of, preserve that perceived value for what we do, right? From one, the effort that the rider does and the service that the rider provides and this entire operation in the dark store that makes this convenience of delivering something to your doorstep possible. But also the fact that, hey, we want to offer you good products, imported products, things that you might not necessarily find elsewhere. And there's a cost to that. So we understand that sometimes we'll be able to, when it's justified, when there's an argument. I mean, for certain type of customers that we know are extremely loyal, we can think about these tactics and approaches. But what we try to do is really maintain the quality throughout, and this is our bet to being able to not lose, reduce our churn, make sure our retention rates are high, and at the end of the day win that retention more and grow into the company that we want to be and expand into the markets where we want to expand in.
And is that your point of differentiation from a marketing perspective? Is that what you focus on for positioning and promotion, or what does the brand that people see look like, if that's kind of the internal way of thinking about it?
Well, precisely, it's we don't talk about the conversation that we're having and the conversation that we want to spark with the community and the stakeholders at large is the fact, just explain a bit the purpose that we have. We're a purpose-driven company, and I think this is critical. And it's kind of elevating the conversation from, hey, you get the fastest delivery and you get the best prices, which I think this is where a lot of the other players were stopping at, right? And we're trying to elevate the conversation and not talk about these things, but talk about a human tension, or how we're addressing a human tension, and we're addressing a human truth. And what we found, and this is something that's very true in Africa, is that good quality service seems to be reserved for the privileged only. So you're in a very chaotic environment where infrastructure is poor, and the vast majority of the population really goes through hell to get their groceries. It's not like in Europe, where you have metros, public transportation, buses, electric bikes, perfectly cemented roads. There's a brick and mortar every 5 minutes. You have options. No, I think there somebody necessarily wants to get goods to sustain the week for their families. They go on a mission. It's a quest, and then they come back, and so definitely not pleasurable there. So what we're saying is that we want to fight that monster, and we want to fight the monster that so far, right, the good quality was only reserved for the privileged, and you have to have money to be able to have a chauffeur, send something to the supermarket, get it back, or get access to like very expensive premium locations that provide you the best products and the best service, but that's only like 10% or 5% of the population that can afford it. So we went from that tension, and we created our belief, and our core belief is that we believe that the type of service that makes life better or that improves quality of life should be for everyone. And that's how we think about the business. So everything that we do, right, from a culture creation internally, like how people should think about the relationship with customers and what we're doing as a company, to the communication that we're doing and to the actual price points and everything that we're doing, everything from, commercial, from operations, from customer, from after sales services, everything that we do is directed and influenced by this idea of, we believe that the type of service that makes life better or improves quality of life should be for everyone. So we don't discriminate. Location, economic background, social, whatever, in that sense. And I think that this is this is how we differentiate ourselves. That's our point of difference.
So I know we're coming up on time. I think the last big question that I like to ask you, and then we can wrap up, is, there's obviously a balance between long-term and short-term. And I think it's interesting. You haven't once mentioned long-term as a substitute for sustainable. And I don't think that it has to be. I think particularly within this category, being sustainable, focusing on quality, this kind of purpose-led mission of bringing people the access and opportunity and experience that before was reserved for the few. That's not only a long-term thing. That's also short-term. Helps you stand out. At the same time, you're venture backed. You obviously have targets and, growth objectives and things like that. So trying to think of like a sharp way to ask this question, but I guess how do you balance those things of wanting to focus more on, what I would say maybe is the healthier, more purpose-led, sustainable way of doing things versus the commercial realities of being in business, and particularly a VC-backed business in an industry that's so aggressive right now?
Absolutely. I think this is where, the context is very important, right? I think that we cannot have the same expectations today that we had perhaps before. So there's a very different type of conversation that's happening in the boardroom. There's a very different type of conversation that's happening outside the boardroom. So I think that people are just looking at things and using a different language than before. So it kind of today makes, what I'm trying to say is that there's a bit more realism, overall. I think that people are becoming a bit more realistic, and they're going back to the fundamentals like, not becoming unicorn in 16 months is okay. You know what I mean? That's not, what you're here is like, what you want to create a sustainable, what we mean sustainable is that it can sustain itself. So it has to be able to generate more profit, so more revenue, more profit than cost at the end of the day. And that's what that's the big conversation we're having today. But secondly, I think that if we need to today, really pay attention and at our stage is unit economics. I think that we need to get really granular and look at the business in a very granular way. So how is our, from everything that we do, from performance marketing to, the promotions that we do on certain categories, the decisions that we take, from an operations point of view, all of these different things are really just a consequence of very clear KPIs at the unit economic level. So if these are in the green, that's okay, because that is clearly a statement that the business is healthy, the operation is healthy. We might not be at a stage right now where, we're generating enough excess cash to be able to expand 2-3 countries at the moment. But that's again, we should be okay with that at the end of the day. As long as the unit economics are good, as long as we're able to make sure that whatever we're doing well, we're not compromising on the fundamentals, I think this is where you gain the respect of your investors and the boardroom, and I think the company as a whole.
All right, Diego, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for making the time and being here. Fascinating conversation, and I know our audience will be very interested in it as well. 2 quick questions, because actually I realized I forgot to ask you the icebreaker question in the beginning. So let's do that first.
I was waiting for those.
What is a challenger brand that you are particularly curious about or passionate about right now?
So I'm going to be, I'm going to go for one of the big ones, and that's a very popular one. It's Nike. So I think that, despite the size and scale of Nike today, they're still a challenger brand. They still are challenging conventions. They still are challenging the status quo. And they're doing it in such a consistent manner. You have a lot of big companies. I think Adidas, if you look about it, you felt that they changed their purpose 15, 20 times over their tenure. While Nike has been true to, turning every man into an athlete. And I think the evolution, while remaining consistent, they've done something beautiful, is that they've been able to, reinterpret and help as well they were part of the popular conversation at every point in time, right? They were the first one to say, you don't need to be a professional to be an athlete. And then they went into, they were first ones to actually celebrate not only, Michael Jordan, etc., but the average Joe. And then now with the last campaign, Dream Crazy, I think they've evolved from championing athleticism to, inspiring people to become champions of the human race, which is amazing, right? And I think that taking a stand, specifically in a world where there's so much noise and so much action, there's so much chatter happening from a certain side of the aisle, that having a brand like Nike coming and balancing that conversation and saying, you know what, no, we stand for something that we think is correct and right, is just beautiful.
One of my favorite business quotes is from Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, and it says that the best way to stay number one is to act like a number two. So I think that challenger ethos has been within Nike since the very beginning. All right, actual last question now, Diego. What is one thing that people should do differently after listening to this conversation today?
So I don't know. I think I love to read. I would suggest a book which is called Range, and it just makes the case for having more generalists in the world today, because I think as a society and as a species we're obsessed with specialists. We're obsessed with Mozart. These kind of prodigies that from 3 years old they've done only one thing and they're just brilliant at it. And I think that as a human race, I think we're much more we're engineered to be generalists, right? And the more you can be a generalist, I think this is where the more creative you can become, the more value you can add. So that's if you have to read one book, read Range, and yeah, more generalist, please.
I second that recommendation. It's a good book. All right, Diego, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope to meet you in person in Madrid at some point soon.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me. A pleasure.
Take care.
Scratch is a production of Rival. We are a marketing innovation consultancy that helps businesses develop strategies and capabilities to grow faster. If you want to learn more about us, check out wearerival.com. If you want to connect with me, email me at eric@wearerival.com or find me on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, share with anyone you think might enjoy it, and please do leave us a review. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.